My name is Erin Hatton, and I did my science fair project on water quality and contamination. This experiment was based off the topic of water contamination around the world. Contamination is the polluting and making impure of a substance. Human intoxication is the leading factor of why water is being polluted. There are many people in the world who are affected by bad water, which is a necessary thing for all of us to live. Investigating a water source is one of the most accurate ways to get to the root of the water pollution, as well as using distillers and filters, which are also an accurate way of seeing the issues of water and its source. But it is a difficult task overall to pinpoint exactly where this issue stems from. Water is tested using pH level testers in maintaining or investigating its purity, and surface runoff is a leading factor in how water becomes contaminated in itself. When water travels on any given surface, it picks up chemicals and sediments. These chemicals can be used in agriculture and are in direct contact with the water, which make it impure. Common contaminants and impacts on humans. Common contaminants that are in the water include bacteria, nitrogen, bleach, salts, and toxins. Bacteria and toxins are microorganisms which can cause severe health problems. Bleach and nitrogen cause skin discoloration, nervous system, and organ damage, as well as salts, which cause chronic and long-term conditions such as cancer and kidney failure from dehydration. The questions that arose from this experiment were, why do certain areas of the world have very contaminated water and chemicals in that certain area of water? Another one was, how does surface runoff truly contaminate water? How does contaminated water affect environmental needs, such as the water cycle? And how does water become contaminated in the first place? Hypotheses that came from this experiment were that chemicals from environments and runoff affect water's pH or toxicity through how the water reacts to the chemicals that it's forced to interact with. These were made off of the introductory information, which told that chemicals and bacteria infect water, and its pH levels can be altered through these methods. By experimenting and testing, water that is artificially filled with runoff and chemicals will show how water is naturally contaminated in the real world. Materials that were used were pH test strips, 2 plastic containers which were used to hold the water in the samples, and the 3 samples, which were water and salt, water and vinegar, and water and baking soda, and as always, lab safety equipment. The experimental setup. The independent variables were the amount of chemicals and the runoff added. Dependent variables were the conditions of the water samples, how each sample results. The constants were the amounts of water in each sample, containers, and how the water is placed in the containers, as well as some other minimal constant variables. The control experiment was running pure/distilled water through the setup and testing for salt and pH. The procedure. Step 1 was making the water samples, which was the salt, acid, and base samples. Next was building the model, the box is the ground, and the drainage holes, and the bowl to collect water from the bottom, as you can see over here. Step 3 was testing the salt, sand, dirt, etc. on water before and running through the soil. And step 4 was gathering data and measurements of water samples and repeating this experiment. So here are my results put into this chart. The salt solution began at a pH of 6.2 and stayed at 6.2 before and after the experiment. The acid sample, the pH began at 7.8 and ended at 6.8, 1 whole digit down. And the base sample began at a pH of 8.4 and ended at 7.8, moving 0.6 down. So why are these results important? These results taken from this experiment help provide an answer to the questions and an explanation to the hypothesis. They explain what happens to water when it is contaminated with substances that alter its pH and other aspects of the water molecules themselves. The possible errors were that the salt solution was not concentrated enough and that the tests only tested for pH and not other aspects. The solutions would be using colder water and more salt to prevent the salt from disintegrating, as well as using more broad tests that cover more types of chemicals other than just pH. Moving forward, it would be worthwhile to repeat this experiment with water from an area that has real pollutants in it, and research in previous experimentations that prompted interest in this experiment include Sudan specifically and their water supply, chemicals and bacteria that turn water brown and contaminated, as well as charities like the Water Project. This experiment is useful for scientists who are investigating and experimenting with contaminated water and how it is affected by the world around us. This new information could be applied using the data in improving methods of water testing. The scientific fields that it can be used in are biology and earth science, and the careers are biologist and water quality tester. This leads towards the build of a water tester and learning more types of contaminated water. This experiment could also lead to trips to find contaminated water and investigate if given more time and resources. And here are my works cited. Thank you so much.